Now let's talk about calling the prospect. If I go back to those two different types of people that you might be calling, networking partners and prospects, you would use a different script depending on how you're treating or viewing that person that you're trying to reach out to. So if you're treating the person that you find on LinkedIn, whether they're a connection or just a profile you came across, and you're treating them as a prospect, you can actually use the same exact call script that we provided earlier in the Smart Sales System for general cold calling. Here's the value points cold call script. And like I said, you can use this exact script regardless of whether you got them in a contact database or on LinkedIn. But your introduction, the reason for my call is we help with benefit 1, benefit 2. I actually don't know if you want to improve those areas. That's why I had a question or two. If I could ask you real quick, how concerned are you about this? Who are you using for that? Oh, when I talk with other department managers, they often have challenges with this. It might be productive to have a brief conversation because we provide, and here's some details about what I sell, but I've called you out of the blue, so I don't want to take any more of your time right now. Are you interested in discussing this in a little more detail? And you try to close for the appointment. Now, if you're treating them more as a networking partner, the script is slightly different. And it's much shorter because when you're calling prospects, a lot of times you just want to power through and ask as many questions as you can and get as much information as you can and get around objections. If you're calling people and you're trying to establish a networking relationship, you don't necessarily want to fight that much. If someone's not open to networking, you don't really want to try to get around that objection and it's like forcing someone to like you or date you, right? If someone's not feeling it, you want to let them go and try to find someone else to spend your time with. So here's a shorter script, and it basically just kind of puts yourself out there to see if someone is interested in kind of networking with you. So, hello Tom, this is Michael Halper calling from Sales Scripter. We actually recently became connections on LinkedIn. Have I caught you in the middle of anything? Great. Well, the reason why I'm reaching out is I try to reach out to my connections on LinkedIn to learn more about what they do and try to see if there are any ways that I can help them to be more successful. After that value statement, you can then do a sales takeaway, which is, but I don't know if you're interested in building new networking relationships, but that's why I'm reaching out. And then you could just go for a quick close, right? So at this point, you put yourself out there, you've communicated what you're all about, and you can just kind of validate, are they open to that? So are you interested in scheduling some time to talk in a little more detail? Like I said, I'd like to learn a little bit more about what you're doing and working on. And you can close them for a brief call, or maybe you might end up having a conversation right then. Even if you have a conversation right then, you're progressing to the meeting and it's becoming an instant meeting, and that's the end of the call script and the end of the cold call. But that's a call script for calling LinkedIn connections that you're networking with. Now if we look at scripts for people that you're meeting with that you find through LinkedIn, if we go back to prospects, the meeting script is exactly the same whether we schedule a meeting with a prospect through LinkedIn or if we schedule a meeting through a cold call or some other format. And so this is the exact same first appointment script where we have some warm-up questions, current environment questions, pain questions, pain points. Second half of the meeting, we can then talk a little bit more about us. This is what we do. This is how we're different. Depending on what if you think that there might be a fit and reason to talk in more detail, towards the end of the meeting, you can then qualify the prospect to determine is it a legitimate fit and potential for them to move forward. We've talked about qualifying before already in a previous chapter, and then you can close the prospect at the end of the meeting. You could very likely, if you follow this process, you're going to start conversations and schedule meetings with networking partners as well. You can use the networking meeting script, which is slightly different than the first appointment prospect script. It's just a little bit less salesy and more networking. So it starts out with some networking questions. You can certainly then, on the front end, the front end of the networking conversation, you want to try to make it as much as you can about the person you're trying to build a networking relationship with. So you need to learn about what's going on with them. So you can do that by asking current environment questions. Pain questions, you can determine whether or not these are appropriate to ask. These are a bit salesy where you're trying to determine does the person have the pain points that you help to solve. If you're genuinely networking with the other person and it doesn't really matter whether or not they have the pain points, it might not make sense to ask pain questions, but they're here. And same thing with pain points. whether or not you're trying to sell to them. And when you're networking with LinkedIn contacts or just business contacts, it's a two-way street. You want to spend the first half of the meeting learning about them. Second half of the meeting, hopefully you have the opportunity to talk about you and what you do. And so that's where you talk about your product and your company. And then you would wrap up with some closing questions. And if you're networking, you're not closing on, the interest and sale. You're more closing on, does it make sense to work together? What's the best way to work together? Do you want to continue to work together and stay in touch? So that's pretty much it. I hope that helps, and let us know if you have any questions.